Hello, and welcome to Software Pulse Building Java Desktop Applications, and I'm John McNeil. In this video, we're going to extend our RESTful web service that we've looked at in the last series of videos. I'll put a link in the description so that if you want to have a look at the previous videos, you can catch up on where we are, because we're going to build on what we've already got. So in the last session, we described and talked about what we were going to do, why we were going to do it, and how it was going to work. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to extend our web service, add some endpoints, but you can only use those endpoints if you have successfully authenticated with the web service and you're able to provide a JSON Web Token when you call these endpoints to prove that you have authenticated. So that's what we're going to do in a nutshell. So let's switch to the code and have a look at how we go about this. Here's our project where we left off the last time we coded something, and the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to introduce some libraries to help us handle the JSON Web Token side of things. So I'm going to add into the dependencies, I'm going to add some new dependencies. So these dependencies are all to do with JSON Web Token. We've got an API, the implementation, Jackson, and the Jax, that I'm thinking that's XML or something like that, API. And so I put that in my POM file. Again, you have to watch the previous videos to work out how we got the POM file in the first place and got all that set up. I'm just adding into it. So that's all ready for that. So now what we now need to do is to upload these libraries into our project. So we're going to do an update, press OK. And what we'll see over on the left hand side in our project, we'll see the libraries imported turn up. And now that's done, so we can close down our POM because we've finished with that. And we can now start to build up these new endpoints we're going to have that we're going to use our JWT token to be able to access. So that's what we're going to put in now. So we'll start putting the code in for that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a private static list that holds a collection of people, of objects of person called people, and it's going to be an array list. And the reason why it's static is so that it belongs to the class, the people resource class, rather than every time you call the web service, it's going to create a new object of people resource. If you have a property that belongs to an object, then every time you make a call, that property is going to be recreated. And given this is supposed to be a list of people that web service knows about, we don't want it to be recreated every time. We want it to persist between calls. So normally you'd put this into some sort of persistent storage like a database, but we're not going to that level of complexity here. So just to get around it, I've created a static property called people that will persist between calls. So as we add people into the list, it will build up with each subsequent call, and that's why we've done it. The next thing I've done is I've created an endpoint /login that just returns. I'm going to tie this in to my authentication. So the authentication we used in the last video, in the last time we coded this web service, I'm going to use that, and I'm going to tie it into this endpoint /login there. So that's why it doesn't do anything, is because it's just going to do the authentication bit. Then I've got something called /add. This is for adding people to our people list that we just spoke about. Don't need that. So you send in a JSON object. It gets converted into a person object, and then it gets added to the people list. So that's all it does. It's nice and simple. Then we've got that. Actually, I don't want to do that. Right. Then we've got a method called list, and what this will do is return the list of people. as a collection of JSON objects, and so you can see who's in your list. Then we've got again, I don't want to have app in there. Then we've got get person, and this is I'm just trying to think, because I'm not planning to use this. Okay, so what it will do is it will return a person object as a JSON. It will return the person as a JSON object, and you'll pass the name as a parameter in the query string. So it's a get call, and in the query string you'll have a parameter called name, and then you'll put the name of the person you're calling in there, and it will return the details to do with that person. Then we've got @delete. We've got an @delete. Again, I had to import. Let me just go up and show you the imports. He says, and then can't see that. Oh yeah, there it is. Jakarta WS delete. I've imported that. I've imported the Java util list and a Java util array list. So we've added the @delete. It's a /app remove, and then we're passing the name as part of the URI. We've seen that in previous examples of how to do that. And it consumes, again, you pass a JSON object, although we don't actually make use of it, because all we're going to do is we're going to take the parameter off the URI. We're going to iterate through the list of people until we find a match, and if we find a match, we're going to remove that item, that object, from the list. So there are endpoints. Now, what I was going to show you was I was going to package all this up into a web archive file, deploy it to our web service, and show you it all in action, because there's no authentication on any of these endpoints at the moment. So if you did that, you can prove and test all of your endpoints are working correctly. So I would recommend you do that. I'm not going to show you that in this video because it makes the video too long. So there's all our endpoints. The next thing we need to do is we need to add some security to these endpoints. We need to say, if you call these endpoints, you can only use them if you can provide us with a valid JSON Web Token. So let's go and have a look at that. So for that, I'm going to go to the security filter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a whole load of static properties here. So the JWT header prefix works exactly the same way as the authorization header prefix works. If you pass across a JWT token, it will have a prefix of JWT, and we need to be able to strip that bit out. So that's what's there. The login URL prefix is what we're going to look for, is when you make a call with a particular URL that has login in it, we're going to assume you want to log into the web service. So we're going to redirect you to that bit. Again, if you make a call and it's got app in the URL, we're going to assume that it is a secure endpoint, and therefore we're going to look for a JSON Web Token before we will respond to that call. I'll come back to the timeout bit. It's to do with building JSON Web Tokens, as is org, app, and username. So that's what they're for. In my filter method, I had an if statement here, and we're going to extend this if statement with an else if. So I'm just going to come down to the bottom here. So what I've done is I've put else if, and I'm getting the URI that we're calling, getting the path, and checking to see whether it contains app in it. If it does, then we know we need to get a JSON Web Token. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the JSON Web Token from the request context by calling this private method get token, which I'm just going to add down the bottom here. So our get token takes the request context, gets the headers and looks for a header with JWT in it. You can have more than one, so hence we've got it going, the results going into a list. And then we're just going to check that we've at least got one value. We're going to take that first value, assuming it's our JSON Web Token, and we're going to strip out the JWT at the beginning, because we just want to end up with the JSON Web Token, not the tag on the front, and then we'll return just that plain JSON Web Token. So that's what the get token does. It just strips out the token. So long as we've got a token, we are going to create an object of type claim. Now, claim is part of the IO JSON Web Token, part of the classes libraries we just imported earlier. It's one of those. And we are going to create a new class called JSON Web Token. JSON Web Token helper, JWT helper. So let's just create class. Okay, so we're obviously going to use this class to help manage some JSON Web Token things for us. So there's a lot going on here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a private static final string, which is the key for our JSON Web Token. I've just made up something that's fairly long and fairly ridiculous. Don't do that. If you're going to do something that you're going to put out there, make sure it's something sensible. But it just makes the point of it's your secret key that you're going to use to be able to create JSON Web Token objects to issue to people once they've successfully authenticated. So I've got a public static method called create JSON Web Token. It's going to take an ID, an issuer, an audience, and a long value, which is just a number of milliseconds in time. So we get the current time in milliseconds, and we basically create a date from that using Java util. Because if you watch the previous video where I explained how this works, you'll understand why we're creating that date. We're going to create a signature algorithm that's also from the IO JSON Web Token library we imported, and we're going to use HS256. We are then going to take our key, convert it into a base 64 binary, using Java XML bind, and that will give us a byte array. And then we are going to create a new secret key spec using extended Java crypto spec, and that's going to be a java.security key that we're generating. So we're going to pass in the API key secret bytes that we've just created in the line above, and the signature algorithm name that we used in the signature algorithm we want to use. So what it will do is it will use that signature algorithm, and it will use that key to sign our JSON Web Token. And we're going to create a JSON Web Token builder, again from the IO JSON Web Token library that we imported earlier. That's why we imported these libraries, because we needed all these things to help us. So we're going to use the JSON Web Token, I'm not sure what the S stands for, builder. And we're going to set the ID to the ID we've passed. We're going to issue at now. So we're going to say we issued it at this date and time that we created above. The issuer, that's who we're going to issue the JSON Web Token to. The audience is what the JSON Web Token is going to be used for. The audience will be for this web service. And we're using a sign with, it's deprecated, I know. but we are using it here to sign with the algorithm HS256, and we're using the signing key we created above to actually sign it. Okay. Now the long value on the end here is an expiry date for the JSON Web Token. Again, if you watch the previous video, you'll understand why that's important to use and to think about what value you're going to use there. So I'm not going to go into it now. We're just simply using that time value to set the expiration time for the JSON Web Token. And then we're going to return, we're going to use the builder method, or the compact method to generate that JSON Web Token and pass it back. So that's what the create JSON Web Token does. There's another example here where I have added subject. It's got subject as well as audience in there, and it does exactly the same thing. Then we've got a validate, and we're going to return. It returns a claim. So if we come back here, this line here is where we got up to in our if-else statement. We're going to see whether our JSON Web Token is valid by calling this validate method, and we're going to get the claim back. So this is the method we're calling. We're going to pass the string token. And we're going to create a JSON Web Token parser, set the key. We're going to use the key above, and we're going to parse the claim and get the body and return a claim. So what that will do is the claim will, let me just go back to there. So when you get the claim, if it's not null, you can then check whether all the things you would set in a claim are equal. So I've hard coded up here, the username is John McNeil, so the only person who this is designed to work with is me. Normally you would log in and you'd use the user's details to set the token to that user, and it's for just this application, the People API application, and it's because more than one company can have a People API. It's for softwarepulse.org is the issuer of that JSON Web Token. So we're saying, does that JSON Web Token we've just validated, does it match the name? Is it for me? Is it for this organization? And is it for this people.api there? And then if I'd used the subject value, I was testing for it there. So if all of those match, I will return. If it doesn't match, I will drop down and I will create an unauthorized response, with the reason being it's an invalid token, and I will then respond with abort with unauthorized status. In fact, very much like we've done in the previous ones with login on. It's exactly the same thing we do with logging in. So any API endpoint now that we call that has app in //app in the name is going to have to provide a JSON Web Token, and that JSON Web Token is going to have to match these details and have to be encoded with the key that we put up here. Okay, so now we've encoded. The next thing we need to do is we need to log in. We need to provide a facility to take username and password details and generate a web token to issue back. So let's take a look at that. So what I've done here is I've added the if else in between the top if statement and the if else we put down here for the app. So What I'm saying again is I'm checking the URL for the login prefix that we set earlier. I'm getting the header, the authorization. I'm not going to spend time on here because it's exactly like the login we did in an earlier video. Again, checking the description for the links to the earlier videos about how this works. So we come all the way down, and if our username and password is correct, I'm not going to go through the fact don't hard code these things. I've just done it for an example. We are going to create a JSON Web Token, and we're going to pass the org, the app, the username, and the timeout value. So let me come back, because I said I was going to talk to you about. So the reason the timeout value there is basically it's going to be, what is it, 60 seconds, 60 minutes, so an hour. Timeout's going to be an hour. So you create a web token and it'll be valid for an hour, and then after that you're going to have to go through and log in and get another one. So that's what that's for. We can now build our web archive file, deploy it to our web server, which again, if you want to know how to do that, go down to the description, look at the previous videos, and that will show you how to do that. I won't run through that again. And then what we'll do is we'll turn to our tool of choice for just testing our web service. I'm just using SOAPUI because that's the one I've been using, and it works for me. So first of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to call the add endpoint. So new rest. Get rid of the bit on the front. It's a post. So we're going to call the add endpoint as a post call. We're going to pass it this JSON Web Token here, and we'll see what happens. And what we get back is invalid token, which is what we'd expect. 401 unauthorized invalid token. So what we'll do is we will have a look at we'll see about logging in. So we'll put the login in, and we will just press the button, and user cannot access them resources. I've deliberately typed different words so I could recognize which error message was coming up. So basically we failed to authenticate, so we can go to the authentication, say we want to new authentication, we want basic authentication, we want to authenticate preemptively, and our username is john.mcneil, and our password is let me in. And if we now press that, what do we get? Yes. So now what we do is we get this ID back, username back, and then this JSON Web Token. And we want the JSON Web Token. So now we've logged in, what we're going to do is we're going to add 2 or 3 people to our list, and then have a look at our list, and then remove one of the people from our list, and then come back and have a look at the list, just to prove how it works. So what I've got here is a request to the add endpoint. You see the app slash add. I'm going to put this JSON, I'm going to try and add this JSON object there. And what I need to do is in the header, I need to add a header and say it's a JWT header, because that's the tag we're looking for. And then paste in the JSON Web Token I got when I logged in, which I've got on my clipboard there. So I'll do that, and then I'll press this, and we don't get anything back. If you're going to build a web service, you're going to want to make sure you come back with the right status and give some sort of confirmation. I've kind of skipped over that bit. So there's Paul added, and we will add Susan, and we'll make a female, and we'll make a 48. We've still got our header. Oops, we've still got our header there, so that's good. And that's gone. And then we'll do one more. We'll use Jane, female, and we'll make We'll make a 18. So we've added 3 people to our list now. What we should be able to do is switch to this test here. So this endpoint is just employees, is just /list. Remember, it's not got the app in it because this is, there's going to be no header provided, and there's going to be no authentication, and it's going to be a simple get call here. So we'll press that and we'll expect to see 3 people come back. If we look at that in the JSON thing, JSON view, you can see we've got Paul has come back, we've got Susan come back, and we've got Jane come back, and we've got female for the right people, and we've got the ages that we put in. So there's our list that we've got, and then what we can do is we can look to remove somebody. We'll look to remove Susan. So I'll add Susan onto the end of it. So we've got /app, /remove, and then /Susan, Susan being the name we're looking for. We've got our header still there, and we're using a delete option this time, not a get or a post, and we'll press that, and again you just get this 204 no content back. You probably want something better than that, but if we go back to our list now, yes, this is our list. So we've got 3 objects, 3 JSON objects there. If we press that now, Susan will disappear, and we'll just have Paul and Jane. And there we are. And just to prove this, if I go back to, I'll go back to my delete here, and I will delete that, and we will try and remove Jane from our list. And when I press that, I've got invalid token as my message back because I haven't passed the right token. So there you are. There's an example of authenticating against a web service, getting a JSON Web Token back upon successful authentication, and then going on to use that JSON Web Token to make calls to other endpoints where they check for a valid end token and only allow you to do things if it's valid. I hope you found that informative, useful, helpful, and it helps inspire you to go forward and try and build some of your own web services. This is Software Pulse, building Java desktop applications, and I'm John McNeil.